better than the Senate because it is and always has been and always will be and was intended to be, and the Senate should be eliminated, and if not the Senate, at least the filibuster, which could be done tomorrow and change this town. But if you want to block a bill, you don't need the Senate. You only need one House. And in order to do anything useful when our government is so completely perverted, you want to block bills, not pass them. And so in the House, you just need Democrats, and you can lose lots of them, to block a bill, and you've blocked it, such as funding. The Senate can't fund anything without the House, right? And if the Republicans all vote no on a bill for some cockamamie reason, like it'll kill grandma or Martians will land, then you only need 39 Democrats to vote no. And if you can't get 39 people in this town to represent majority opinion in this country, we're done for. That's where the fight is, I think. The question about arrests, I saw Ellen, I think, talking to you. There are people in this room who are experts on this, and I encourage you to talk to them, but come out, bring $100 in cash. At most you probably need 50, but you can share. Bring $100 in cash, bring a photo ID with your address on it. Don't bring anything else. Slows us all down. They count everything and document it and give it back. Takes hours. Bring those two things and your nerve and your wits and your integrity and all your friends on Monday.
One-third of 5 minutes, about a minute. I think it was a bit of hyperbole that I helped bring at the time, young men into the service. I was working for the Fort Dix Post, a newspaper run by the recruiting service. It was a very different time, and going in for your 2 years was an act of frivolity, and nobody took the Army seriously. But if you look to the right and you look to the left and you saw what was happening, what training for killing men, and you did it at some even moderately serious level, you couldn't come out of that 2-year experience very fond of war. And in a perverse way, I wish there were an opportunity for everybody to be in that position for about 15 seconds. I'm not suggesting a universal draft, but it gives you an insight that maybe there's no other way to have. I want to talk about the genocide. Vermont, I might add, the University of Vermont was the seat of study for Raoul Hilberg, who really originated Holocaust studies with his monumental work, The Destruction of the European Jewry. We still have you can still get a master's, and I think soon a doctorate in Holocaust studies at UVM. And I think acting on genocide is a moral duty with constraints. And what I'm concerned about, given our establishment, our government, is that there'll be no adequate definition of when we should go in, no limitations on self-interest, the use of the word genocide to put ourselves in a military position where we seem to have an excuse. So we really need to proceed multilaterally, very carefully. I talked about failed prescriptions for a just war, double and triple what I said about the caution in setting up criteria for stopping genocide. Having said that, it's a serious and troubling and important duty that we need to look to the future, but without the U.S. as the empire nation leading the charge.
I'll just say two things very briefly. One, I think one of the great tragedies of the 20th century was the way in which the Roosevelt administration made it difficult for Americans to go and fight fascism in Europe. And that's another part of that story, is not only the use of force by governments, but also the use of force by citizens. And I'm speaking specifically to the Abraham Lincoln Battalion and the way in which veterans who returned from that war were penalized. There's still one living member of the battalion in Wisconsin who is keeping that memory alive. The other thing I would say is that one of the recurring problems that we have spoken to tonight is the way in which the Supreme Court has essentially, and I say tonight because it's been a long 24 hours for me at this point. The Supreme Court has recurringly engaged in making law. You know, if you talk about the doctrine of corporate personhood, or if we were to speak of the various decisions that the court handed down in the 20th century regarding the National Guard, most recently the Perkins decision. There have been more recent decisions, but that's the one I think that's most relevant to some of our discussions here. We have a constitutional process which is very inflexible and not accountable, and which means that, that the Supreme Court essentially rules and settles many of these questions. So I think in terms of the question of the use of force, in terms of the prevention of genocide, we don't have a constitutional structure that provides for that, and that's a problem. And we need to engage in constitutional renewal in this country across the board. Finally, I want to recognize some anonymous donors who made a generous contribution here tonight, today, and really thank you for doing that, because it will help us to cover our costs. So if folks could please give them a round of applause. Thank Elaine Brower. You want to take a bow?
Hi everyone. Thank you for staying here for such a long time and for such a wonderful conference. I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is just adjacent to the district, for those of you who don't know. And one of the advantages of living in the DC region is that people come to visit you a lot, and so you get to have a lot of guests, which I think is just wonderful. We had a couple of friends come and visit us not long ago, and they went down to DC. They went to the White House. They were doing the tourism thing, and they went over to the guard booth in front of the White House. And one of them said to the guard there, "Do you know where the military-industrial complex is? We've heard that it's near here." And the one guard turned to the other one and he said, "Do you know where that is? I've heard of it, but I'm not sure where it is." And the second one says, "Yeah, I've heard of it too, but no, I don't know where that is." So, I mean, I think the moral is we talked a lot about the military-industrial complex today, and I think we still have a lot of education to do on it. Like Leah, I'm very humbled to be asked to chair this panel, and I want to thank Ben the Younger, a.k.a. Ben Manski, and Ben the Elder, a.k.a. Ben Scotch, for inviting me to do that. And also, like Leah, I learned a lot last year. I'm the chair of Peace Action Montgomery, which is a chapter of Peace Action in Montgomery County, and also was kind of the de facto chair of the Maryland Bring the Guard Home campaign. And I had never done any advocacy in Annapolis before, and I found it quite interesting. I just want to share a couple of things that I learned in that. My own delegate described to me what the function of the Maryland legislature is, and she said, the function of the legislature actually is to keep bills from coming to a vote. And that was certainly something that we learned and that wasn't expected to me. And then another thing, you can draw your own conclusions from this. We were working very closely with Senator Madaleno's aide, and we were having a hearing that was coming up on our bill. We did have a hearing in both the Senate and the House. And he pointed out to us that we needed to be cognizant of the fact that there was another hearing that was just going to precede ours, and that there was likely to be a lot of people there for that hearing because the public was really interested in it, and that there would be a lot of press there, and so we should get there early if we wanted to get a seat. And indeed that was the case. There was, you couldn't even get in the hearing room because it was so crowded, and there was so much media there. Well, the bill that garnered all this attention, where ours didn't, that bill was to change the words of the state song. So I think, again, we have a lot of work to do in the country when changing the words to a state song is way more important, apparently, than addressing war and peace. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce this panel. John Boniface is a constitutional attorney from Amherst, Massachusetts. On the eve of the Iraq War, he brought a case on behalf of soldiers and families and some members of Congress challenging on grounds of unconstitutionality that war, and he sued Rumsfeld and Bush, and then subsequently wrote a book about the case called Warrior King, the case for impeaching George W. Bush. And John Conyers wrote a foreword to that book. I haven't read it, but it sounds really interesting. Caleb Rossiter is a professor at the American University. For the last 2 years, he's been counsel to Congressman Bill Delahunt, working on hearings related to war powers and the long-term agreement that the U.S. has with Iraq. And finally, I want to introduce Don Wallace, who is a professor of law and here at GU. He said this is his 44th year here, and he's also chairman of the International Law Institute. He also told me that he is a dilettante, and he confessed that he's a Republican.
All right.
And then said that he is, quote, not of this world, which if he's a Republican, I might agree. And finally, he told me, see, it's not a good idea to talk for very long to the person who's going to introduce you. He told me something that I've been puzzling over. He said that the strength of men as compared to women is that, quote, we are adolescents forever. And I really still don't know what that means. So I'm going to turn the panel over to our speakers. They're each going to have 10 minutes. And the last thing that I want to say here, though, is to second the plea to all of you to come out to the White House on Monday. And I'll be there with David. And if you haven't been arrested, it's an interesting experience and one that I recommend.